black single dad saw a little girl searching trash on New Year's. And the truth left him stunned. The security uniform hung heavy on Malik's shoulders as he unlocked the front door to their small apartment. 12 hours of standing guard at the downtown office building had left his feet aching and his back stiff, but the sight of his 9-year-old son Jaden sprawled on the couch with a comic book made every sore muscle worth it. "Dad!" Jaden jumped up, his gap-toothed grin lighting up the modest living room. "You're home! I saved you some cereal from breakfast." Malik couldn't help but smile. Even after 2 years of being both mom and dad, moments like this still caught him off guard. "Cereal for dinner? What would your mama say about that?" "She'd say we need vegetables." Jaden giggled, then his expression grew more serious. "But she'd also say it's okay sometimes when you work really hard." The mention of his late wife sent a familiar pang through Malik's chest. Sarah had been gone for 2 years now, taken by cancer that moved too fast for any of them to catch their breath. Some days felt easier than others, but nights like this, New Year's Eve, when other families were celebrating together, the loneliness hit different. "Well, your mama was smart about most things," Malik said, ruffling Jaden's hair. "But tonight's special. It's New Year's Eve, and we're gonna do it right." Jaden's eyes widened. "Are we ordering pizza?" "Nah, son. Something better." Malik pulled off his security jacket and rolled up his sleeves. "We're making your mama's famous spaghetti and meatballs. The real deal." "But Dad, you always burn the meatballs." "Hey now, that was only twice. Maybe 3 times. Malik opened the refrigerator, mentally calculating the contents. Ground beef he'd bought on sale last week, a box of pasta, and 1 can of tomato sauce. Not exactly a feast, but it would work. "Besides, this year I got a secret weapon." "What?" Malik pointed at his son. You're gonna help me cook, and together we can't mess it up." For the next hour, their tiny kitchen filled with the sounds of sizzling meat and Jaden's constant chatter. The boy had inherited his mother's gift for talking through any silence, a trait that had saved Malik from drowning in his own thoughts more times than he could count. "Danny's dad got him a new bike for Christmas," Jaden said, carefully stirring the sauce while Malik shaped meatballs. "It's got 21 speeds and everything." 21 speeds, huh? What's he gonna do with all those speeds?" "I don't know. Probably just ride really fast." Jaden paused, his stirring slowing down. "Dad, do you think we'll ever get a bike like that?" The question hit Malik in the chest. They talked about a bike for months, but every time he almost saved enough money, something else came up. The car needed repairs, or the electric bill was higher than expected, or Jaden needed new shoes because his feet wouldn't stop growing. "You know what, Jay? I think we're gonna make that happen this year. Might not have 21 speeds, but it'll be yours." "Really?" "Really. Your old dad's got some tricks up his sleeve." Malik didn't mention that those tricks mostly involved picking up extra security shifts and living off peanut butter sandwiches for lunch. Jaden didn't need to worry about the balance in their checking account or the stack of bills on the kitchen counter. That was Malik's job. By 7 o'clock, they were sitting at their small dining table with steaming plates of spaghetti and only slightly burned meatballs. Malik had even found a can of Pepsi in the back of the fridge to split between them, making it feel like a real celebration. "Dad, this is really good," Jaden said, twirling pasta around his fork the way Sarah had taught him. "I think Mama would like it." "Yeah, I think she would too." Through the thin walls of their apartment building, they could hear Mrs. Garcia's television playing some New Year's Eve countdown show, and the Thompson family upstairs getting ready for whatever party they were heading to. Normal sounds of normal families doing normal things. "Hey Dad, can we go outside and see if we can hear the fireworks from downtown? Marcus said they start at midnight." Malik glanced at the clock. 8:30. They had time for a walk around the block, and the fresh air might help settle the heavy meal in their stomachs. Plus, Jaden had been cooped up in the apartment all day while Malik worked. "All right, but we bundle up. It's cold out there." They spent the next 20 minutes layering on coats, hats, and gloves before stepping into the crisp December night. Their neighborhood wasn't much to look at, a mix of small apartment buildings and row houses, most of them needing fresh paint and new roofs. But it was home, and more importantly, it was safe. Malik had made sure of that when he'd chosen this place after Sarah died. The streets were quieter than usual, most folks probably inside getting ready for midnight, or already at parties. A few porch lights were on, and somewhere in the distance, they could hear music playing. "Look, Dad!" Jaden pointed up at the clear sky. "You can see stars tonight." Malik followed his son's gaze upward. The city lights usually washed out most of the stars, but tonight they were visible, tiny pinpricks against the dark canvas above them. "Make a wish," Malik said. "New Year's wishes are the strongest kind." Jaden closed his eyes tight, his face scrunched in concentration. Malik found himself doing the same thing. "Please let this year be easier. Please let me be enough for him. Please let us be okay." When he opened his eyes, Jaden was tugging on his coat's sleeve. "Dad, look over there. By the big dumpster." Malik turned to follow his son's pointing finger, and his heart nearly stopped. Huddled next to the apartment building's trash bins was a small figure, a little girl who couldn't have been more than 6 or 7 years old. She was digging through the garbage, her tiny hands pulling out what looked like a half-eaten sandwich. Even in the dim streetlight, Malik could see she was shivering, her thin jacket nowhere near enough protection against the winter night. Her hair was tangled and dirty, and she clutched that piece of stale bread like it was the most precious thing in the world. "Dad," Jaden whispered, his voice small and confused. "Why is she looking in the trash?" The question hung in the cold air between them, and Malik felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't just a walk around the block anymore. This was something bigger, something that would change everything. He just didn't know how much yet. Malik's feet seemed rooted to the sidewalk as he watched the little girl's desperate search through the garbage. She moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this before, checking each piece of trash carefully before discarding it. When she found something edible, she examined it under the streetlight like a jeweler inspecting a diamond. "Dad?" Jaden's voice was barely a whisper. "Should we help her?" The question snapped Malik back to reality. He looked down at his son, whose wide eyes reflected the same shock and confusion that Malik felt churning in his stomach. How do you explain to a 9-year-old that sometimes kids have to eat from trash cans? How do you make sense of something that shouldn't make sense? "Stay right here, okay?" Malik said softly, placing a gentle hand on Jaden's shoulder. "Don't move from this spot." Malik approached slowly, the way he might approach a frightened animal. Each step felt deliberate, careful. The little girl was so focused on her search that she didn't notice him at first. Up close, he could see just how thin she was, how her clothes hung loose on her small frame. Her jacket was meant for autumn, not a December night in Chicago. "Hey there, sweetheart," Malik said in his gentlest voice, the same tone he used when Jaden had nightmares. "You okay?" The girl's head snapped up, and Malik saw large, dark eyes filled with terror. She clutched a piece of bread against her chest protectively, and scrambled backward, nearly tripping over an empty bottle. "It's okay," Malik said quickly, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "I'm not gonna hurt you. I just want to make sure you're safe." But the girl was already moving, stuffing the bread into her jacket pocket as she backed away from him. She reminded Malik of the stray cats that sometimes wandered through their neighborhood, skittish, survival-focused, ready to bolt at the first sign of danger. "Wait," Malik called out, but not too loudly. He didn't want to scare her more than she already was. "Are you hungry? I've got food at home. Real food." The girl paused for just a moment, and Malik thought he saw something flicker in her eyes, hope, maybe, or desperate hunger. But then she shook her head frantically and took off running down the alley between two buildings. "Wait." Malik started after her, but she disappeared into the shadows faster than he could follow. His security guard reflexes kicked in, and he jogged to the mouth of the alley, but she was gone. Vanished like she'd never been there at all. Malik stood there for a long moment, breathing hard, staring into the darkness where the little girl had disappeared. His heart was pounding, but not from the brief chase. It was pounding because everything in his body was screaming at him to do something, and he didn't know what. When he walked back to Jaden, his son was standing exactly where Malik had left him, but his face had changed. The carefree joy from their dinner was gone, replaced by something heavier. "She ran away," Jaden said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah, she did. But why?" "You were trying to help her." Malik knelt down so he was eye level with his son. "Sometimes people are scared, Jay. Especially kids who've been hurt before. She doesn't know us, so she doesn't know if we're safe." Jaden nodded slowly, processing this information. "Dad, why was she eating trash?" There it was again, that question that cut straight through to the heart of everything wrong with the world. Malik had seen plenty of hard things in his 32 years, but watching his innocent son grapple with this reality felt like swallowing broken glass. "Sometimes people don't have enough food," Malik said carefully. "Sometimes they don't have anyone to take care of them. But she's just a kid. Kids are supposed to have moms and dads." "You're right. They are supposed to." They walked home in silence, but Malik could feel the weight of unspoken questions hanging between them. Jaden kept looking over his shoulder, as if hoping the little girl would reappear. When they got back to their apartment building, Jaden stopped at the front door. "Dad, what if she comes back? What if she's still hungry?" Malik looked at his son, really looked at him. Jaden had inherited his mother's compassionate heart, the kind that couldn't see suffering without wanting to fix it. It was one of the things Malik loved most about the boy, but it also scared him. The world had a way of breaking hearts like that. "I don't know, son. I honestly don't know." Back in their apartment, Malik went through the motions of getting Jaden ready for bed, but his mind kept wandering to the alley. Who was that little girl? Where were her parents? Was she sleeping outside on a night when the temperature was supposed to drop below freezing? "Dad," Jaden said from his bedroom doorway as Malik was cleaning up the dinner dishes. "I can't stop thinking about her." Malik set down the plate he was washing and turned around. "Me neither." She looked really scared. "Yeah, she did. And really hungry." "Yeah." Jaden was quiet for a moment, chewing on his bottom lip the way he did when he was working through something difficult. "If Mama was here, what would she do?" The question hit Malik like a punch to the gut, but not because it hurt. Because he knew the answer immediately, without any doubt whatsoever. Sarah would have followed that girl into the alley. She would have sat down on the cold ground and waited until the child felt safe enough to come to her. She would have brought her home, fed her, and moved heaven and earth to make sure she was protected. Sarah never could walk past someone who needed help. "Your mama," Malik said slowly, "would tell us that we can't just pretend we didn't see what we saw." Jaden nodded solemnly. "So what are we gonna do?" Malik looked at his son, then toward the window that faced the alley where a little girl might be spending New Year's Eve alone and hungry. Everything logical in his brain told him to stay out of it, to mind his own business, to focus on taking care of his own child. But logic had never been louder than his conscience. "I don't know yet," he admitted. "But we're gonna do something." The next morning, Malik couldn't concentrate on anything. He barely slept, his mind replaying the image of those frightened eyes and tiny hands clutching stale bread. While Jaden ate cereal and watched cartoons, Malik stood at their kitchen window, staring down at the alley where they'd seen the girl. "Dad, you're doing that thing again," Jaden said without looking away from the television. "What thing?" "The thing where you stare out the window and your forehead gets all wrinkly." Malik touched his forehead unconsciously. "I'm just thinking. About the girl?" "Yeah, about the girl." Jaden muted the TV and turned around on the couch. "Can we go look for her?" The question had been bouncing around Malik's head all night. Part of him wanted to forget what they'd seen, to focus on their own life and their own problems. But the bigger part, the part that sounded suspiciously like Sarah's voice, wouldn't let him rest. "All right," Malik said, making the decision as he spoke. "Let's go see what we can find out." They bundled up again and headed outside into the gray New Year's Day morning. The alley looked different in daylight, smaller, more ordinary. But the dumpster was still there, and when Malik looked closer, he could see evidence that someone had been sleeping nearby. A flattened cardboard box tucked behind the building, a small pile of what looked like food wrappers. "Dad, look!" Jaden pointed to the ground near the dumpster. Footprints. Sure enough, there were small shoe prints in the dirt, leading away from the trash area toward the abandoned apartment building at the end of the block. Malik had always wondered about that building. It had been empty for months, with boarded windows and a "for rent" sign that never seemed to attract any takers. They followed the footprints to a side entrance of the building, where one of the boards covering a basement window had been pried loose just enough for a small person to squeeze through. "She's living in there," Malik said, more to himself than to Jaden. "In the basement? But it's so cold." Malik's heart clenched. He knelt down by the loose board and called softly. "Hello? Anyone in there? We're not gonna hurt you. We just want to help." Silence. "My name's Malik, and this is my son Jaden. We saw you last night, and we brought you something to eat." This wasn't entirely true, they hadn't brought food, but Malik figured he could run home and get some if she would just talk to them. After a long moment, he heard a small voice from inside. "Go away. I know you're scared," Malik said, sitting down on the cold ground so he'd seem less threatening. "But we're not going to call anyone or get you in trouble. We just want to make sure you're okay." "I'm okay. Are you warm enough in there?" Another long pause. "I'm fine." Jaden sat down next to his father. "What's your name?" he called out. "Jaden," Malik warned quietly, but his son continued. "I'm 9. How old are you?" "7, came the reluctant answer. "7's a good age," Jaden said seriously. "Do you like cartoons?" This seemed to catch the girl off guard. "Sometimes." "Me too. My dad says we can't watch them all day, but I think cartoons are better than grown-up shows because they're funnier." Malik watched his son work his innocent magic, drawing the frightened girl into conversation. After several more minutes of Jaden's chatter about cartoons and school and his favorite foods, the girl's voice grew a little less guarded. "My name's Amira," she finally said. "That's a pretty name," Jaden replied. "Where's your mom and dad?" The silence that followed was so heavy that Malik felt it pressing against his chest. "My mama died," Amira whispered. 3 weeks ago." Malik closed his eyes. 3 weeks. This little girl had been surviving on her own for 3 weeks. "What about your dad?" Jaden asked gently. "He left before I was born. Mama said he wasn't ready to be a daddy." "I'm sorry about your mama," Malik said softly. "That must be really scary, being by yourself." "I'm not supposed to tell anyone," Amira said quickly. "The lady at the hospital said they'd put me somewhere else if I didn't have family. But I want to stay here. This is where me and Mama lived." Malik's throat tightened. She was afraid of the system, afraid of being taken away from the only place that felt like home. He understood that fear more than she could know. "Amira, you can't keep living like this," Malik said carefully. "It's not safe. You could get sick or hurt or—" "I'm fine." Her voice got sharp again. "I know how to take care of myself. Mama taught me. I'm sure she did. But sweetie, you're 7 years old. You need grown-ups to help you." "No, I don't. I don't need anyone." Malik heard movement from inside the basement, like she was backing away from the window. He was losing her again. "Wait," he said quickly. "What if we could help you without telling anyone official? What if it was just between us?" The movement stopped. "You can't," Amira said, but she didn't sound as certain. "Maybe we can," Malik said, even though he had no idea how. "But first, will you let us bring you some real food? And maybe a blanket?" A long pause. Then, so quietly he almost missed it, "Okay." 20 minutes later they were back with a bag full of leftovers from their dinner, a thermos of hot chocolate, and Malik's heaviest winter blanket. They left everything by the loose board and waited while Amira pulled the items inside. "Thank you." Her voice came from the darkness. As they walked home, Malik's mind raced. He had about $40 in his checking account, a stack of bills on his kitchen counter, and now apparently a 7-year-old girl depending on him for survival. The smart thing would be to call social services immediately. But when he looked at Jaden's hopeful face, and remembered the terror in Amira's voice when she talked about being put somewhere else, he knew he couldn't make that call. Not yet. First, he needed to figure out if there was another way. Monday morning, Malik sat in his apartment with a cup of coffee and a phone number he'd found online for Chicago's Department of Children and Family Services. He'd been staring at the number for 20 minutes, his finger hovering over the call button. Just call them, he muttered to himself. Do the right thing. When he finally dialed, an automated message informed him that due to the New Year's holiday, offices would be closed until January 3rd, and emergency services were only available for immediate life-threatening situations. Malik hung up and tried again, this time calling the non-emergency line. After 15 minutes on hold, he reached a tired-sounding woman who took down his information about finding a homeless child. And you said the child is currently where? The caseworker asked. In an abandoned building basement. She's been there for weeks. Sir, I'm going to need to transfer you to our emergency intake team. Another hold. Another transfer. This time to a man who sounded like he was eating lunch while he talked. Okay, so you found a homeless kid. Is she injured? Not that I can see, but is she in immediate physical danger? Malik paused. She's living in a basement with no heat, eating from trash cans. Right, but is someone actively trying to hurt her right now? No, but then it's not an emergency. We'll have someone out there by the end of the week to investigate. The end of the week? It's January 2nd. That's 5 more days. Sir, we're severely understaffed, and we just came off a holiday weekend. We'll get to it as soon as we can. The line went dead. Malik stared at the phone, frustration building in his chest. 5 more days. 5 more nights of a 7-year-old sleeping alone in a freezing basement because the system was too backed up to care. When Jaden got home from spending the morning at his friend Marcus's house, the first thing he asked was, "Did you call the people about Amira?" "I tried, son. They said they'll help, but not for a few days." Jaden's face scrunched up in confusion. "But she needs help now." "I know. So what are we gonna do?" That afternoon, they brought Amira more food and managed to convince her to come outside for a few minutes. In the daylight, Malik could see just how bad things were. Her clothes were dirty and too thin for winter, her hair was matted, and she had dark circles under her eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. But when Jaden offered to share his handheld video game with her, her face lit up in a way that reminded Malik that underneath all the fear and survival instinct, she was still just a little kid. "I used to have one like this," Amira said, carefully holding Jaden's Game Boy like it was made of glass. Before your mama got sick?" Jaden asked gently. Amira nodded. "We had to sell lots of stuff to pay for her medicine. But it didn't work anyway." Malik watched the 2 children sitting on the ground outside the abandoned building, sharing the small electronic game and talking like old friends. Something twisted in his chest when he noticed how Amira kept glancing around nervously, as if expecting someone to come take even this small moment of happiness away from her. "Dad," Jaden said as they walked home that evening, "Amira's like my sister now." "Son, it's not that simple." "But it is. She needs a family, and we need." Jaden paused, thinking. "We need someone else to take care of. Mama always said taking care of people makes you stronger." The words hit Malik harder than they should have. Sarah had said exactly that many times. She'd volunteered at the community center, always brought extra food to elderly neighbors, and once insisted they foster a pregnant cat until she could find good homes for the kittens. "Taking care of people makes you stronger, but it also makes you vulnerable," Malik said quietly. "What's vulnerable mean?" "It means it's easier to get hurt." That night, Malik lay awake doing math in his head. His monthly income as a security guard barely covered their current expenses. Adding another person, even a small one, would stretch their resources past the breaking point. They need more food, probably more space eventually, Definitely more money for emergencies. And then there were the legal complications. What if social services found out he was harboring a minor without going through proper channels? Could he lose custody of Jaden? Could he lose his job? But every time he closed his eyes, he saw Amira's face when Jaden had offered to share his game. He saw the way she'd carefully saved half of every meal they brought her, storing it away like someone who'd learned that you never knew when the next one was coming. Around 2 in the morning, Malik heard Jaden's bedroom door creak open. "Dad? You awake?" "Yeah, buddy. Can't sleep?" Jaden padded into the living room and climbed onto the couch next to Malik. "I keep thinking about Amira in that cold basement." "Me too. What if we brought her here? Just for tonight, because it's supposed to snow." Malik looked at his son's earnest face in the dim light from the street lamp outside their window. "Jay, it's not that easy. There are rules about these things. Laws. But the law people won't help her for 5 days." "You said so." "That's true. And you always tell me that sometimes you have to do what's right, even when it's hard." Malik sighed. His own words coming back to bite him. "If we do this," Malik said slowly, "it's just for tonight. Until I can figure out something better." Jaden's face broke into a grin. "Really? Really? But Jaden, this is serious. This could cause problems for our family. Do you understand that?" "I understand. But Dad, she's already part of our family. We just haven't brought her home yet." An hour later, they were back at the abandoned building with flashlights and warm coats. It took some convincing, but eventually Amira agreed to come with them, clutching a small backpack that apparently contained everything she owned in the world. Walking back to their apartment building with 2 children instead of one felt surreal. Malik kept waiting for someone to stop them, to ask questions, to point out all the ways this was a terrible idea. But the streets were empty, and when they got to their apartment, Malik made up the couch with clean sheets and his spare pillow. Amira stood in their living room looking around like she was visiting a palace. "Is this really okay?" she asked in a small voice. "It's okay," Malik said, meaning it. "You're safe here." For the first time in 3 weeks, Amira smiled like she believed it. For 3 days it worked. Amira slept on their couch, ate meals at their small table, and slowly began to look like a normal 7-year-old instead of a frightened survivor. She and Jaden fell into an easy rhythm, sharing toys and watching cartoons while Malik worked his security shifts. Mrs. Chen from downstairs was the first to notice. "Malik," she said, catching him in the hallway on Thursday morning, "I heard children's voices yesterday." Plural. Malik's stomach tightened. Mrs. Chen was notorious for knowing everyone's business in their building. "Jaden had a friend over. All night? I heard a girl's voice at 6 in the morning. She stayed over. Sleepover." Mrs. Chen's eyes narrowed. "What friend?" "I know all of Jaden's friends from school." Before Malik could answer, she continued. "And another thing, I've seen you buying more groceries. Lot more. You think I don't notice these things?" Malik forced a smile. "Kids eat a lot, Mrs. Chen." But he could see the suspicion in her eyes as she walked away. By Friday afternoon, the whispers had started. Malik noticed it when he picked up Jaden from school, other parents stopping their conversations when he approached, giving him sideways looks. When he stopped at the corner store for milk, the cashier asked, "How many kids you got living with you now, Malik?" That evening, as Malik was helping both children with homework at the kitchen table, there was a sharp knock at the door. Not the casual knock of a neighbor, but the authoritative rap of someone official. Malik's blood turned to ice. "Kids, go to Jaden's room. Now." "But Dad," Jaden started. "Now." The children scrambled toward the bedroom as Malik opened the door to find 2 women in business suits holding official-looking badges. "Mr. Johnson? I'm Lisa Martinez from the Department of Children and Family Services. We received a report about an unregistered minor living in this residence." Malik's mouth went dry. What report? May we come in?" It wasn't really a question. The women pushed past him into the small living room, their eyes immediately scanning the makeshift bed on the couch, the extra dishes in the sink, the small pair of shoes by the door that clearly belonged to a girl. Mr. Johnson, housing a minor child without going through proper channels is a serious offense, the second woman said, pulling out a tablet. Where is the child? Look, I can explain. Sir, I need you to produce the child immediately. From the bedroom came the sound of crying. Not Amira's quiet sniffles, but Jaden's loud, angry sobs. You promised! Jaden's voice carried through the thin walls. You promised we'd help her! Malik closed his eyes. This was exactly what he'd been afraid of, not just losing Amira, but destroying Jaden's faith in him, in promises, in the idea that good people could make things better. The children are in the bedroom, Malik said quietly. Children? Plural? My son Jaden lives here. The girl. Her name is Amira. Her mother died 3 weeks ago. She's been living in an abandoned building, and Mr. Johnson, you should have called us immediately. Do you understand that by harboring this child, you've potentially put both children at risk? At risk? I gave her food and shelter. She was eating from garbage cans. The first woman, Martinez, softened slightly. I understand your intentions were good, sir. But there are procedures. Background checks, home studies, proper placement protocols. We have trained foster families. She was going to freeze to death. And now she's going to be properly cared for. Malik heard his bedroom door open, and Jaden appeared with red, swollen eyes. Amira was behind him, clutching his hand, looking smaller than ever. Please don't take her, Jaden said to the social workers. She's my sister now. We take care of each other. Martinez knelt down to Amira's level. Hi, sweetheart. I'm Lisa. We're here to help you. Amira pressed closer to Jaden. I don't want to go. I want to stay with Malik and Jaden. I know this is scary, Martinez said gently. But we're going to take you somewhere safe, with people who are trained to take care of children who've lost their parents. I am safe here. Amira's voice rose to a near scream. Malik takes care of me. Jaden shares his food with me. This is my family. The second social worker stepped forward. We need to go now. The longer we wait, the harder this gets. No! Amira broke away from Jaden and ran to Malik, wrapping her thin arms around his waist. Please don't let them take me. I'll be good, I promise. I won't eat too much food, I won't take up space, Malik's heart shattered. He knelt down and gently placed his hands on Amira's shoulders. Hey, listen to me. This isn't about you being good. You're perfect just the way you are. Then why can't I stay? Because the world is broken, Malik thought. Because sometimes doing the right thing isn't enough. Because good intentions don't override bureaucracy and legal systems. Because I didn't do this the right way, he said instead. And that's my fault, not yours. Martinez stepped forward with a small suitcase. We'll need to pack her belongings. Everything I have is in my backpack, Amira whispered. As the social workers guided Amira toward the door, she kept looking back at Malik and Jaden with desperate eyes. You said I was safe here. You said this was my home. Amira. Malik started, but what could he say? That adults lie? That the system fails children every day? That sometimes love isn't enough? At the door, Amira broke free one more time and ran back to him. Please come get me, she whispered against his chest. Please don't forget about me. I won't forget, Malik whispered back. I promise. And then she was gone, and Malik was left standing in his suddenly empty apartment with a sobbing 9-year-old who looked at him like he betrayed everything they both believed in. You promised we'd help her, Jaden said through his tears. You promised. Malik sank onto the couch, staring at the pillow that still smelled like the little girl who'd called this place home for 3 precious days. He'd failed them both. For 2 weeks after Amira was taken, Malik barely spoke to anyone. He went to work, came home, and sat in his chair staring at the couch where she'd slept. Jaden moved around the apartment like a ghost, eating meals in silence and avoiding eye contact with his father. The worst part was the phone calls. 3 times, Malik had called the DCFS office trying to get information about Amira's placement, and 3 times he'd been told that information was confidential unless he was a legal guardian or family member. "But I'm the one who found her," Malik had argued. "I'm the one who kept her safe." "Sir, I understand your concern, but you have no legal standing in this case." No legal standing. The words echoed in Malik's head as he walked through their neighborhood on his day off, unable to sit still in the apartment any longer. Without really meaning to, he found himself standing outside the abandoned building where Amira had been living. The loose board over the basement window had been secured now, probably by the social workers. But something made Malik walk around to the back of the building, where he noticed a small pile of belongings tucked behind a dumpster, things that must have been too damaged or worthless for anyone to bother collecting. He knelt down and sifted through the pile: a broken hairbrush, some water-damaged books, a torn stuffed animal. At the bottom, he found a manila envelope with several photographs scattered inside. The first few pictures were clearly of Amira and her mother, a thin, beautiful woman with kind eyes and the same bright smile as her daughter. They were taken in happier times, showing birthday parties and Christmas mornings in what looked like a small but clean apartment. But it was the 4th photograph that made Malik's world tilt sideways. It showed Amira's mother standing next to a familiar figure, a woman in a hospital gown with a bright scarf covering her bald head. A woman Malik would recognize anywhere, even in her sickest moments. Sarah, his wife, standing arm in arm with Amira's mother like they were old friends. Malik's hands shook as he stared at the photograph. On the back, someone had written in neat handwriting, "Sarah and Keisha, chemo buddies forever. October 2022 inch. Chemo buddies." October 2022, that was just 3 months before Sarah died. Malik sat down hard on the cold ground, his mind racing. Keisha. Amira's mother's name was Keisha, and she'd been getting chemotherapy at the same time as Sarah. They'd known each other. They'd been friends. But how was that possible? Sarah had never mentioned anyone named Keisha. She'd talked about the other patients at the cancer center, the ones she'd met in the waiting room during their long treatment days, but she'd never. Wait. Malik closed his eyes, trying to remember. There had been someone. A woman Sarah had mentioned a few times, someone she'd met during treatment who had a little girl. Someone who'd been struggling financially, who Sarah had worried about. "There's this woman, Key," Sarah had said one evening after a particularly long day at the hospital. "She's got a little girl, maybe 6 years old, and she's trying to do this whole cancer thing by herself. No family, no help. It breaks my heart. Key. Short for Keisha. I wish we could do more for her," Sarah had continued. "She's working 2 jobs just to keep their apartment, and now with the medical bills." Malik remembered being so focused on Sarah's own treatment, so consumed with his own fear of losing her, that he hadn't paid much attention to her stories about other patients. He'd been drowning in his own anxiety and barely keeping his head above water. But Sarah had cared. Of course she had. Malik pulled out his phone and called the one person who might remember more details, Sarah's sister Maya, who had driven Sarah to many of her appointments. "Maya, it's Malik. I need to ask you something about when Sarah was getting treatment. Do you remember her talking about a woman named Keisha?" "Keisha. Oh yes, the one with the little girl. Sarah was always worried about her." "Why? What do you remember about her?" "Well, she was a single mom, I think. Sweet woman, but she was having a really hard time financially. Sarah used to bring her extra food sometimes, and I remember one time Sarah insisted we stop at the grocery store to buy formula for her daughter. Sarah said the woman was too proud to ask for help directly, but she was clearly struggling." Malik's throat tightened. "What else?" "Oh, there was that time when Sarah brought her groceries to her apartment. It was in your neighborhood, actually, just a few blocks from your building. Sarah made me drive her over there when she was feeling up to it. She said the woman hadn't been to treatment in a week, and Sarah was worried she'd given up." The pieces were falling into place, painting a picture that Malik could barely comprehend. Maya, what happened to her? I don't know. After the funeral, I lost touch with most of the people from the cancer center. Why are you asking about this now? Malik told her about Amira, about finding her in the alley, about everything that had happened in the past few weeks. Maya listened in stunned silence. Oh my God, Malik! That little girl. Sarah used to show me pictures of her on her phone. She was so proud of how smart she was, how brave. Sarah said she was the strongest little kid she'd ever met. Sarah cared about them. She loved them. You know how Sarah was, she collected strays. But this was different. She felt connected to Keisha because they were both single parents fighting for their kids. And she adored that little girl. After Malik hung up, he sat in his car outside the abandoned building, staring at the photograph of his wife and Keisha. All this time, he thought he was just helping a random child in need. But Amira wasn't a stranger. She was the daughter of the woman who had held Sarah's hand during chemotherapy. The little girl that Sarah had worried about and cared for. The child that Sarah would have moved heaven and earth to protect if she'd been alive when Keisha died. Malik felt something shift in his chest, not just guilt or compassion, but a sense of cosmic justice. Sarah had taken care of Keisha when she was sick. Now it was Malik's turn to take care of Keisha's daughter. This wasn't charity. This was family. This was a debt of love that demanded to be paid. Armed with the photograph and Maya's testimony, Malik walked into the legal aid office on Monday morning with a determination he hadn't felt since Sarah's diagnosis. The lawyer, a tired-looking woman named Rebecca Torres, listened to his story with growing interest. So you're telling me that this child's mother had a relationship with your late wife, and that your wife provided care and support to this family? Yes. I have proof. Malik showed her the photograph and played Rebecca the voicemail Maya had left detailing everything she remembered about Sarah's friendship with Keisha. Rebecca leaned back in her chair. This changes things significantly. You're not just a good Samaritan trying to adopt a random child. You have a legitimate emotional and historical connection to this family. Can you help me get her back? I can try. But I need you to understand, this is going to be a fight. The state doesn't like to reverse placement decisions quickly, and you'll need to prove you can provide a stable home environment. I can provide stability. Can you? Your income is barely above poverty level, you're a single parent, and you've already demonstrated a willingness to circumvent the legal system. Malik felt his hope deflating, but Rebecca continued. However, your wife's prior relationship with the biological mother, combined with the fact that the child expressed a clear preference to stay with you, gives us something to work with. We'll need character references, a home study, and proof of financial stability. The next 6 weeks were the hardest of Malik's life. He picked up every extra security shift available, working 16-hour days to show increased income. He asked Mrs. Chin, the same neighbor who'd first reported him, to write a character reference. To his surprise, she agreed. I was wrong to call the authorities so quickly, she admitted. I've been watching you with that boy of yours for 2 years. You're a good father. Maybe that little girl needs a good father too. Other neighbors followed suit. Mrs. Garcia wrote about how Malik always helped carry her groceries. The Thompson family described how he'd help fix their broken heater during a snowstorm. Even Jaden's teacher provided a letter about what a well-adjusted, kind child he was, a reflection of his home environment. The most powerful testimony came from an unexpected source, Dr. Patricia Wilson, the oncologist who had treated both Sarah and Keisha. In my 30 years of practice, she wrote, I've rarely seen patients care for each other the way Sarah Johnson cared for Keisha Williams. Sarah worried constantly about Keisha's daughter, often asking if there were resources available to help the family. When Keisha missed appointments due to childcare issues, Sarah would offer to watch Amira in the hospital waiting room. Sarah spoke of that little girl as if she were family. The first hearing didn't go well. The judge seemed skeptical of Malik's motives and concerned about disrupting Amira's current placement. But Rebecca had requested that Amira be allowed to speak to the judge privately, and whatever the 7-year-old said in that closed chamber changed everything. When the judge returned, Her expression had softened considerably. The child has expressed a clear and consistent preference for placement with Mr. Johnson, she announced. She also provided some compelling testimony about the care she received in his home versus her current placement. 3 weeks later, Malik stood in the same courtroom, this time with Jaden beside him, waiting for the judge's final decision. Mr. Johnson, the judge said, while your methods were unconventional, it's clear that your actions were motivated by genuine care for this child's welfare. Dr. Wilson's testimony about your wife's relationship with the biological mother demonstrates that this placement would honor existing family bonds. Malik held his breath. I'm granting you temporary foster custody of Amira Williams, with the possibility of permanent guardianship after a 6-month review period. Jaden let out a whoop that echoed through the courtroom, and Malik felt tears streaming down his face. When Amira walked out of the foster care office that afternoon, carrying the same small backpack she'd arrived with, she looked different. Cleaner, maybe a little taller, but also more guarded than before. Are you sure I can come home now? She asked quietly as they walked to Malik's car. I'm sure, Malik said. And Amira? You never have to leave again unless you want to. For the first time in weeks, she smiled. The next 11 months flew by in a blur of school projects, scraped knees, bedtime stories for two, and grocery bills that stretched Malik's budget to its limits. But somehow they made it work. Jaden taught Amira how to ride the bike they'd found at a yard sale. Amira taught Jaden how to braid friendship bracelets. And slowly, their apartment began to feel like a real home for 3 people instead of 2 people and a guest. On New Year's Eve, exactly 1 year after Malik had first spotted a little girl searching through trash, he stood in their kitchen preparing dinner while Amira and Jaden argued about which movie to watch later. We should watch something happy, Amira insisted. New Year's is supposed to be about new beginnings. But action movies are more fun, Jaden countered. Right, Dad? Malik turned from the stove where he was stirring Sarah's spaghetti sauce, a recipe he'd finally mastered, and looked at his 2 children. Amira was wearing one of Jaden's old sweaters and had paint under her fingernails from an art project. Jaden was trying to teach her how to make paper airplanes with notebook paper. They looked like siblings. They acted like siblings. They were siblings, in every way that mattered. I think we should watch whatever makes us happy, Malik said. We've got all night. As fireworks began exploding outside their window at midnight, the 3 of them stood together looking out at the city lights. Malik thought about Sarah, and how she would have loved this moment. He thought about Keisha, and hoped somehow she knew her daughter was safe and loved. Last year, he'd seen despair in a trash can. This year, he saw hope in his children's faces. Dad, Amira said softly, slipping her small hand into his. Thank you for finding me. Thank you for letting me, Malik replied. And for the first time in 3 years, New Year's Eve felt like a celebration instead of an ending.